I'm not saying it's a security risk. I'm just saying that I tried it, John.
Difference between a human and an AI is it's now acting on behalf of you.
Techno optimists, John. That's what we
Exactly.
are. Have these 6 things in place, and then we'll think about how do we roll it out.
Challenging a lot of businesses on their current maturity posture. Welcome to another episode of Cloud Unplugged. Today, I believe we promised that we were going to talk through how to roll out AI safely. This has come up quite a lot in our existing customers and people we've been working with. The term shadow AI has been coined, where people are secretly using AI, either their own personal account. And obviously that's a bit of a concern for a lot of businesses because they don't really have any control or oversight. And they also just want to start to use it for their business. They obviously want to start to use it for coding. They want to start to use it just to improve efficiencies and content that they're trying to create, etc. However, how they approach it and where do you begin is often the challenge. So we've broken things down in this episode to kind of go through all of the different pillars that we consider are all the prime ones. I think there are 6 in total. And then we'll talk through a bit of an approach and a process around it, and like how and where do you begin in relation to those pillars. But before we crack on to that, obviously Salman, how are you doing before we obviously get into that?
I'm doing very well, busy implementing these techniques so everybody can have a safer time with AI and the cloud models they want to use. John, looking a bit different today. I see a bit of a tan going on. Were you away? Where were you, John? Tell us a little bit more.
It's just my genetics, actually, Salman. I've not actually been anywhere. No, I was in Spain, in Costa Brava area, which is like the Catalan area of Spain. There's a place called La Scala. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but it's south of Girona, which is near Figueres, basically. But yeah, very, very beautiful. Lots of nice beaches. A lot of kite surfing on some of the beaches there, because I think they get like some wind. Excellent. So yeah, I've caught the sun. It was 38 degrees. Yeah, just casual 30, because it wasn't hot enough here.
Just a couple of degrees above UK, to be honest. Like, maybe a couple. Any talk of AI out there in Spain, John, on holiday?
No talk of AI in those, because they're all like kind of traditional snorkeling, fishing boats, bit of tourism, lots of restaurants, type of vibes. Very chilled, relaxed, non-technology based vibes, which is good. It was good to kind of switch off.
You went for detox. John went for detox and came back with an exquisite tan.
Yeah, we stayed like my friend there. She's opened a grocery shop in a little village, and then her partner has got a restaurant in La Scala itself. So there was a lot of trying loads of things that I don't normally eat, but being super polite and being like, "Oh wow, this is really," but really be like, "Okay, I don't normally eat things like this," but actually it was very good. So out of politeness, I was forced to try new things, which is good.
Excellent. Okay, so tell us, John, when people approach you and they say, "I want to roll out AI safely and securely, just so I have control over what is being run on my estate and people not accessing any of these tools without any guardrails, so they don't get hacked." You've seen so many issues that are happening recently. Things are getting called out that you don't even know are getting used and leaking data. You're leaking your sensitive information. What are the steps we have to take in the pillars that you talk about to make sure you roll out AI safely in your organization?
So I guess I'll kind of go through each pillar first.
Yep.
So obviously the beginning bit is the identity and access and device management. So, do you have control of the devices that you're I guess end users are kind of working on? Is there any controls over them? Do you have audit? Are you approving the applications that get installed? And can you tell whether or not people are doing things on their devices that they shouldn't be, or that something maybe has got installed that maybe is malicious by accident? And do you have the audit of all those things? And so that's one lens. So it's like, how are you managing the devices themselves?
So that is even without AI, right? So that's just good practice anyway, right?
That's good practice, but a lot of businesses may have not felt a need necessarily to have full device management. They might have a different policy for different teams. They might have all kinds of reasons, legitimate reasons, that may have been cost-saving initiatives. They might have done it more for developers or people that are more closer to infrastructure, because there's more risk, because that's where the data is, or that they're closer to the general day-to-day data of applications or customers. But actually, you want to treat it as one universal thing now that everyone's using AI. So that's a very specific thing, and there are tools that you can install that the cloud providers provide. They're not all equal. I think Azure is a little bit more improved. So they have basically a browser DLP, which basically data protection, and it can kind of detect in the tabs for Chrome or Edge or Firefox. It can do detection on whether or not you're doing malicious intent with data, potentially, i.e. you are copying and pasting things from documents into ChatGPT that's you shouldn't be, and it can kind of detect those things. Then you have the users themselves. How does your identity look? How are people logging into your systems? Have you centralized that? Are you using single identity, MFA, all kind of the standard aspects, least privilege, good RBAC controls, conditional access, et cetera, et cetera. Then you've got the control plane itself, which is a little bit ambiguous, calling it a kind of control plane, but that's something that sits in front of the model. Some call it a Gen AI gateway. So basically a way of obviously going through into the model itself, a proxy, almost, so to speak.
Right.
And in there, you can then put controls inside of the proxy. So you can do token limits. You can do failback routing to another model. In there, you can do content safety filters, and prompt shields, and you can obviously hook those things in as well into additional stuff like Purview as well. And then you get into data governance, which is the classification of your data. Do you have things labeled properly to know whether it's sensitive or not? And therefore, again, certain services can obviously, when you kind of categorize the data, it will then know, okay, this is sensitive information here. It's already labeled. I need to take precaution on that. Encryption, et cetera, et cetera. Then you've got the platform foundations, which are just general cloud foundations, landing zones, networking, private networks, internal endpoints, that kind of stuff. And then you've then got the monitoring and audit. Do you know if somebody is doing something malicious? Can you detect it? Are those events coming into a central place? Do you have all the right monitoring and alerting around those services so that you can detect something when it does happen? Even after you've prevented everything in those pillars, like we've said, you still need to know there's still risk. Do you have the right oversight? Do all those things make sense to you, Salman? Are those things?
Absolutely. It seems like, John, that we're not reinventing the wheel. Is that fair to say that these are the practices that you currently follow anyway? These are good practices just to keep yourself secure and keep yourself compliant to a bunch of these things. But I guess because of these problems with accessing the AI models, it's a bit exacerbated because people see issues a lot more nowadays than perhaps they were in the past. But it seems like we're not talking about anything new. Perhaps some implementation is a bit different because tokens, we never had to worry about tokens before. And now we're thinking, oh, maybe in the proxy we can add some limitations of what the cap of a token can go in there. But is that fair to say that we're not talking about something
Yeah,
completely brand
I
new?
don't think the concepts are new,
Yeah.
but I would say that the user behavior is completely different. So
Okay.
before, you would have to share personal and to share sensitive business data would have been an intentional act to like maybe email it to yourself or something like that. But today,
Yeah.
people are obviously using it to help them be better at their job, or maybe to give insights into something that helps them produce a report, or maybe scan things quickly for them on their behalf. So they now are like, where you would have been really, that would have been more about sharing the assets externally,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for different reasons. You're now sharing them legitimately to help yourself be better at your job, hence it being called kind of shadow AI. So those things are a little bit different,
Mm.
because it
Yeah.
means you've got to be quite good at really almost blocking. That's kind of what you really want
Yeah.
to do. You want to
Yeah.
block any other models outside of your own approved models, so that everyone is forced to basically go through your central control plane, i.e. the Gen AI gateway, and they can't bypass it and go to some other model or use their own personal account or bypass
And
the centricity.
that's
Yeah.
fair. And the risk here is what, John? What are we trying to prevent? Are we saying that, oh, as a company we can only use models that are provided by Claude, but we don't trust any of the models that are provided by Grok? What are we trying to protect here? Are we trying to protect IP? Are we trying to keep ourselves safe safe online, or what is the thing that we're trying to protect here?
I guess many reasons. I guess one could be, you don't necessarily have an approval for that model. It could be that the sovereignty of the model, like where
Hmm.
it operates in, is not under the jurisdiction of the EU, or or under your own legal kind of
Fair
rules
enough. Yeah.
and regulation, and therefore people sending sensitive customer data outside of your jurisdiction into other countries into the model is obviously not approved.
Mm.
It could be that people are installing things to integrate into third-party tools to make it easier, i.e., I don't know, Google Drive and SharePoint, and so you're connecting up into, say, it could be anything, could be like Claude desktop,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Copilot, and you're connecting things up, third-party systems that then have access to lots of different data. And I think the difference between a human and an AI is, to do a task, you'd probably be quite intentional of where to look. So you'd be like, okay, I know this information's stored over here, or I'd probably quickly navigate.
Yeah.
With AI, it's probably reading everything to figure it out.
It's got. Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
know where to go, it's had to
Yeah.
process every other piece of data to then figure out the right answer. So, and obviously that's very different to a person, but it's now acting on behalf of you. So it's acting
Yeah.
as if you're doing it, because it's using your
Yeah.
identity. And obviously that's a lot of risk.
So what you're saying is that if a person is on their machine and they're trying to, let's say, look at a report or identify whatever task they're doing, the AI could potentially read whatever's on their machine. They could have sensitive data on their machine and feed it to the AI model, which is what we don't want to do. Is that correct? We're trying to protect the sensitive information that you have from reaching the AI model, so perhaps you can use it to train itself and get better. Is because I'm trying to get to, is that a bad thing? Is this a bad
Well,
thing?
I guess two things. You could decide that for certain operations, you want a much cheaper model. So
Yeah.
what that could be one reason. So you're like, actually, for this type of day-to-day stuff, I
Okay.
don't want to be
Fine.
sending loads of data to the Fable most
Great.
expensive model for these types
Yeah.
of activities. So yeah, there's that, and then obviously you don't want to be necessarily getting a load of random data and then shoehorning it into a model, um, because that's just what you've got access to. So not just on your device, it could be you might be overprivileged. You might be an admin, of
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
estate. You might be a
Yeah.
drive admin on
The
SharePoint. So
whole thing. Yeah.
you've got access to absolutely every piece of information, and then you're using AI on your machine. Technically, then it is also getting access to absolutely everything through your own
Yeah.
permission.
All right. Cool. Tell me, John, how do I get a device that is secure? The first of your pillars, device and endpoint. What do I need to do there to get myself? safely into this AI land?
Well, I think the first thing to do is, if you are wanting to use it for your business, the high probability is, outside of just coding, you're going to want it to have access to files and information, right? It's only valuable when it can start to process things on your behalf, so you don't have to process it all, to then give suggestions or commentary or improvements or new content. But so you then need to really understand, what is the current data access governance that's already in place? Have we shared everything with everyone by default? Because you might not even know what is really shared with you and what you really have access to, because you're not necessarily going through every single file on the drive to see, can I or can't I access this stuff that I should or shouldn't be able to access. So you need to obviously do a bit of a data access governance process, produce a report, look quite quickly at whether there's over permissive permissions in there, and that you've got all the right granularity. That'd be the first thing to do. Before you start to roll it out, and then sort that out quickly, and then look at identity. Similar thing, in your RBAC controls, your identity and access management, is that quite strong and a good posture there.
What's RBAC control, John? Can you just please explain what is RBAC control?
Well, you've heard it here first, guys. He doesn't know what RBAC is.
Yeah, please, John.
I'm a little bit shocked.
RBAC?
I'm a little bit in shock.
What is RBAC, John?
Role-based access control is what it is.
Okay.
Basically, what access are people allowed to have access to? What's the permission set? But not just that, as in, are you doing short-term access? Are you making people escalate privilege when you need to? That kind of stuff. But also, are you blocking maybe certain geos? Would you expect somebody to be logging in from China? That kind of stuff as well, right? So it's not just the permissions.
Yeah. Okay. That's
not
fair.
To pick on China, obviously, because it's got a rumor is it's got a very cheap model that's quite competitive nowadays.
And there's Kimi K3 that came out, John, a couple of days ago, on par with Fable according to the tests, and I have to confess, I did try it. It did work at times, and at times it did get some errors. Perhaps everybody was trying it. So, my machine doesn't block the use of Kimi K3 at the moment, John. I'm just letting you know that.
Wow. Okay. So got a real life security risk on the podcast. Is that what we're saying? Is this a confession?
I'm not saying it's a security risk. I'm just saying that I tried it, John. But luckily on my machine, I don't have any sensitive information apart from some photos and podcasts recording.
We're very equal opportunistic here, though. That's our stance. So we don't like to, get into geopolitics. We're all about open and transparent geo approaches. China, the US, whatever.
We're all for technology, right? That's what
technology.
Are. Yeah, all for technology. We just that's what we're doing. Techno optimists, John. That's what we are. We try all technology.
So I guess once you've done the assessments, once you have fixed your identity, once you've assessed as well your current cloud foundations, where's your maturity? Have you got a good control over, maybe a central VPN that people are routing through, or some form of governance over the device routing? Can you block people from going to specific websites? That type of stuff. And have you got all the right audit and logging into like some central kind of control place that you can do security reports on, and central policies that you could easily roll out? That's what we call kind of the foundation. So they're the first things, like get all of that in place. And once that's in place and the devices, and you've kind of ticked all those things off, then you're kind of safe to be like, right, let's start to think about the model and the gateway that we're going to put in front of it, and then who should have access to it, and are we going to roll it out team by team? And are we going to get the right telemetry there? Are we going to report on the token usage? Have we got good security over it in the gateway? Are we going to use Purview? Have we look at the sensitivity and then start to do it that way on a case-by-case basis. And maybe you want kind of approved things, like what are the things in the catalog that you're allowed to use? I was mentioning the connectors, right? What are you allowed third-party wise to connect into? Are there specific things that we approve, i.e. SharePoint? We'll let you use the MCP for SharePoint. Maybe we'll let you use GitHub MCP,
right,
et cetera, et cetera. So, and then you'd control that rollout so that you can't just use whatever you want. We're obviously like managing it on a case-by-case basis, like you would policies and other exemptions. You'd safely want to control that. After that, you're then into obviously kind of generalizing it more. So then it would be maybe looking at it through the lens of applications. You'd want to reuse all of this because it's universal. You'd have all the right controls then in place to then be like, right, let's get the applications doing agentic. Let's use the same gateway. Let's use that control plane. Let's use Purview, which we're already using. Let's make sure that we've got all the reporting on the sensitive data, and then you'd start to, maneuver into kind of more expansive areas, which are like application-centric things, reusing all the same governance and processes that you've already kind of got in place. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It does.
And so that's why we're about to stop your device from using the new China model. I believe we're about to roll that out on the MDM now. So if you've got anything running, you might want to quickly get the information out now before we block it. So yeah.
So I do need to go back to a point. You keep mentioning the use of Purview in the governance part.
That's just an example of a service in Microsoft. Yeah,
absolutely. Can we go a little bit more into how do you use Purview to make sure that you've done the right level of governance? Like, can you go a little bit more into that?
So Purview, just as an example, offers like data lineage protection. So it can keep track of all the transformation of information and data and where it's kind of gone through. It also has these classification concepts. I think it comes out of the box with a load of default classifications, so it can and rules, and you can add to those rules yourself, essentially, of like how can it understand the data or your data and the sensitivity around it. And so I think it's based on like aspects of what's it called, the Apache, forgotten the name, but basically there's an open source project for data lineage. I think they've all wrapped that. I think Amazon and others, is it Atlas, Apache Atlas? Can't remember. Anyway,
that's fine.
So all the same concepts, all open standards, nothing specifically bespoke about them. It's just that they wrap these services and you can then roll them out, and then have extended it into additional things, obviously like the DLP stuff, which is the in-browser extensions that's then feeding back into Purview. So they're connecting things into Purview to then do the governance and control in that for the data layer.
So to summarize, what we're saying is, in order for you to roll out AI safely and securely in your organization, of course, there's always risks, but to reduce the risk of rolling out AI with governance, you have to do a few things. Make sure your devices and endpoints are controlled by the bits that you mentioned. Use MDM Intune, have compliant devices. Then make sure people have the right access. You mentioned RBAC, role-based access control. Ensure that they have the right level of access, right level of information on the machine, just so the models don't have way more information than they're supposed to have. And then have what we call the AI gateway, i.e. the proxy, in which you can control and have guardrails on what the model can access from your machine, perhaps, and token management and token limits and routing, you can do that. And then what we're talking about is making sure that, you have the right data governance in place. You restrict the content discovery. You have the encryption in the right place. And then the good platform foundations that already exist, right? You have private endpoints, you controlling everything correctly, you have the right keys in place. And after doing all this, you always still need to make sure that you're monitoring, you're auditing, and you're logging what's happened, because if something happens, you perhaps want to go back and see what happened, and also notify you when something wrong happens, right? So have these 6 things in place, and then we'd think about how do we roll it out, and which is that's what we do. Is that correct, John? Is that what we're doing?
That's pretty much it. I mean, you don't need to, I think using a project to prove it out first as a bit of a lighthouse thing, I think is probably that's how I would do it first, because you'd want to validate how effective and efficient not just the technical implementation is, but your own processes around it. Like, because if from a process perspective, if the team's already saturated with BAU and you're trying to add more work into the teams to then be managing, onboarding different projects into AI and putting all the content filtering in place, maybe inside of the Gen AI gateway, what filters and protections do we need for this team? Is it still, are the same filters still applicable from the Lighthouse team into the next one, etc.? So you're iterating and trying to understand from project by project where the risks are. So I guess you do need to look at, like, how is it actually operationally going to come together? Who's accountable and responsible for what? Is our device management already functioning really well and quickly, or is this going to cause scaling problems, into the business when we start to obviously roll this? So you do need to be thinking operationally as well as technically on both sides to get it right, and doing a bit of assessment on that. But yeah, from a technical perspective, they're all the things you're spot on. They're all the things that you do need to think about as well. Yeah.
If I'm a CIO or a CTO, John, which I'm not, or COO, or even a CEO, which you are, John.
Yeah.
What is one message that you should give to them for the safe rollout of AI? Because one thing is, yes, we have all these things, all the things that you have to monitor. This is for the usage, but also the people who are implementing these policies, like the IT department or whoever it might be. Things are moving so quickly. New models are coming out every time. Everybody's saying, "Oh, I need the Claude Fable 5, right? It's just come out. I want it." What do you say to them? How do you first roll out safely? Secondly, stay on top of it, so people who are using this, they don't stay behind. But what is the one thing that they should focus on? A couple of things. I know we talked about these 6 pillars, but what are the couple of things you should tell them in this podcast, John?
Well, I don't know about the couple of things. I think the main thing is to understand the objective of it first as a business. Are you wanting to roll it out because you've got shadow AI going on and that feels like a high risk? So it's more of a risk goal. How do we mitigate the current risk? Or is it that you're wanting to roll it out because we're wanting to reduce our operational overheads currently in our business? Or is it the development side? Is it speed of coding? Or is it application centricity? Are we trying to roll it out because we want to get into new markets, or we wanted to improve our product features? So you can't, what I wouldn't suggest is saying all of it, please. Obviously, I know that's the, but it's probably trying to work out as a priority, which is the first thing to prove for AI first, rather than trying to look at everything that it can do and then trying to boil the ocean with everything. I think then the principles of all these pillars are contextual then to the goal and the objective. How deep you then go in those pillars is contextual to what the real ambition of the goal is. Therefore, you don't need to necessarily start getting into all of the depth of each pillar straight off the bat, and then it takes a year or whatever insane amount of time to roll it out safely across the business. And no one's getting to see any value out of it at all. Like, basically, you've diminished all value. So start with something very clear and concise that frames everything, and then choose that lighthouse customer, and then prove those pillars on a shallow front first, without like loads of depth, and then build the depth over time as you then maybe bite another objective off. Would be my advice.
Okay, so this is excellent advice, because if you try and implement everything in the first place, it might just take you months. I think that is what I was trying to get to, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Your advice, John, to people is pick one use case, right, and implement for that first, rather than thinking about everything under the sun, about operations, development. Just pick one use case and then implement it. See how that goes. But because you have to iterate quick over this, if you're not using, I know, John, we keep joking about how these models are next token predictor, and sometimes they're not that good at producing the information that you require. But at the same time, if you're not using these models, you'll be left behind.
Yeah, you will. Yeah, but
So
I think because there's so much to it, like we're saying, I think because it assumes a certain level of current maturity, like you were saying at the beginning, these are not new concepts. Device management isn't a specific AI concept that's come off the bat of rolling AI out. Data governance isn't a new thing. Identity and access management isn't a new thing, right? So I think what it is doing, though, is probably challenging a lot of businesses on their current maturity posture in those pillars already. Where are you in relation to this? And it's kind of maybe putting it under the spotlight a little bit more so on, like, actually the risk of this is much higher as a strategic objective than maybe some other things that we've had to do before. And therefore we do have to get these things right. But again, doing it right is contextual to what is the first thing you're starting with, and getting the first thing right, not necessarily getting all of it right, I think is the aim. Otherwise you'll never get anywhere. You'll be just sat spinning wheels for ages trying to get everything perfect. Absolutely. You will just increase shadow AI, won't you?
Yeah, how are you finding the rollout of this? I know, John, you've been working with a bunch of organizations. What is, your approach that you're taking to your clients? How are you finding the reception of this approach? Are people saying these are the right levels of controls that we're putting in place, or is it too much? Are you asking too much of our organization to do? How are you finding it?
So I think everybody seems so far to be quite well versed in understanding like what it means. I think probably because, as in what it means to the risk, I think is more what I kind of mean there, because everyone's using it personally, and so they're already sending things. Hey, here's my travel documents for this thing, or go and read my email for this thing, and I want to improve. Like, I need to change the flight to whatever, and or I need to book this holiday, and and so that everybody's sharing quite a lot of themselves, right, already. So I think the concept of data sharing is very well understood already. So there's no educational aspect there.
Right.
I think what I will say is probably the biggest challenge is the facilitation on scope. I think that's probably the value we bring, is really trying to pinch it into something of like, how do you prove the first piece of value of AI rather than getting hung up maybe on all of the risk of AI as an entirety all the time. So trying to get everybody into the right mindset of, we don't need to worry about all those things first. Let's just really try and work out, like, what is it you're really trying to do? Because we want to prove value quickly. That's always the aim. Everybody wants that. And so let's really focus on that. And I think most people probably struggle with that bit. Is probably the biggest thing. Like, where do we begin? What do we choose? And what about you? Because you're in customers too, and you're obviously speaking to people all the time. And what would you agree with some of the things I've said? Do you think I'm talking nonsense?
No, John. 100% agree. I think the issue that I see is, and the reason why I really like your idea of just pick one use case and run with it, is because luckily for us, OpenAI and Anthropic have done the marketing for us, right? Because everybody, as you say, is using these models in their own capacity. And then they see some of these colleagues or some of their friends are making things really quickly, prototyping, businesses, right? Websites, apps that's just coming out within a couple of days, things that are working. And what people are asking is, can we have this straight away? Can we have this technology? Because a lot of organizations are like, well, we're not going to allow you to use these tools because we're still trying to figure out how to use it safely, how to use it securely, what's allowed, what's not allowed. So the employees and their colleagues are not getting it fast enough. I think that's number one. People are still trying to figure. Some organizations are still trying to figure out how to do this securely. That's number one. They're not getting it fast enough. And number two is the people who are implementing this. They're like, there's a lot of this that we don't fully understand. So there's an education on what are the actual risks? That sometimes when you have that threat matrix that you make, okay, what are the threats, and that's why it's important to understand, like, what are the actual threats that you're trying to mitigate against. So, and we're seeing it being rolled out, and I think the biggest issue for the organizations is making sure that people are not sharing the sensitive information. I think that's the biggest problem that they're worried about, right? Some companies don't really care too much about, oh, okay, if you do share my piece of code, which is like already coding in the open. So, I mean, if I do use that a model to share my code, I mean, it's already in open anyway, so it doesn't make any difference. But some people are still worried about, oh, I've got this proprietary software that if people are doing software development on, that's going to go to the model, and then people will get our proprietary information. But the model, I'm not really too sure if that's too much of a problem, because the model already has a bunch of this information already there, right? Like creating rocket science is not something not new. But yeah, so what we're saying is people in some organizations really want this, and the organizations are still trying to figure out, well, number one, which models to use and the cost of these models. And I think people are worried also about the tokens, right? Remember, we spoke about a couple of podcasts ago, COO of Uber said we blew up all the budget for the whole year in April 2026 for the whole, and there's not one single feature I can tell you that was released with AI, right? So there's it's still a very new area that people are trying to get to grips with. Yes, good. You can go on ChatGPT and ask it to generate you images of you doing one or other thing, or you can like run your own websites, which is fine. But like, I still think, John, this what you're talking about, the 6 pillars, is needed. We're talking about pick one use case and develop is needed. So yeah, this is an area that's developing really quickly. But the good thing, as you mentioned earlier on, is these principles that we're discussing. They're not new. Some of the implementation is a little bit different, but they're not new.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, that's it, I think, for this episode. Well, it felt short, but it hasn't been as short as I thought it would have been. But I guess the next one we will probably either choose a topic or get back to the news. There's been a load of things in the news which I did really want to have had to bite my tongue to not bring up. We kind of did hint at it a bit with the new model from China and how cheap it is and the efficiency of it being on a par, but for a fraction of the price, I believe, is in like the capex cost that it's taken. I think is something like, I can't remember, like half or even more, maybe like a third of the price that they've had to spend to get to the same place as the US. Super interesting, and share prices and all these things going on. So we'll probably maybe touch on that depending on what's happening next week. But yeah, stay tuned for the next episode. Cool. See you later, everyone.
See ya.